So, trigger warning here. We're going to talk about CBDCs. And some people use the topic to punch up fear, punch up views, because it seems pretty ominous. But before we even jump in, I'm just going to say that anything that has a single point of failure, like a CBDC requiring the power grid to operate all the time, 24/7, can't be a total replacement to anything. Technology still has limitations. If it won't operate in a Mexican swim-up bar, nobody's going to be okay with it. So the topic of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, is one of those things, one of those topics that probably puts most people on one extreme or the other. You either see it as something way off on the horizon along with flying cars and talking pets, or you see it as inbound and relatively terrifying. And it's probably more the second category considering the subject matter here, because this channel covers buying physical gold, which is effectively the complete opposite of a CBDC. Now, I'm not here to fire anybody up with this one, though. I'm not here even to preach to the choir. This is more to talk through what we know about when and how they're coming, why they probably are, regardless of what we do. And then I'm going to leave you to decide how to plan and whether or not metals play in for you. So I'm going to use a map here that I lifted from atlanticcouncil.com. I think it shows this a little bit more clearly. As you can see here, as of today, 11 countries have fully launched CBDCs, and then 17 more are in pilot mode. That includes countries like China, Russia, Australia. 33 more are in development. That includes the United States, Brazil, and then much of Europe, really. And then 40 more are in active research. So more than 100 countries shown on the map are currently working on CBDCs. Your country is probably one of them. The United States, by the way, announced its proof of concept November 15th. So it's not going to be long before the US moves from development to pilot. Now, if you're a simple bystander on the topic, the benefits given for these programs include all of the expected positives from cost and speed to safety, transparency, and liquidity. And transparency, that's the one that we're going to look at for a moment, because when the Federal Reserve talks about transparency, they typically reference financial crimes as the reason for it. It's not to track you, it's not to look in on how many fur hats you buy in a year. But if you remember my video about merchant category codes and how each of your credit, check, or debit transactions is coded in a way to identify the type of merchant you purchased from, you might remember that those fur hats would show up as MCC 5681. And anyone with access to that ledger would then know how much you spend on them. Now, today the coding isn't necessarily transparency. It's used more as a transaction labeling system inside your bank accounts. But in the event those purchases were made with a CBDC, the transparency inside your account would expand to include your government. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that while banks don't enact policy, they don't make laws or run on political platforms or narratives, governments do. And those narratives and policies and laws that could begin to affect you and your access to your money in a number of different ways. If the political majority decided that only certain people should have access to a certain amount of fur, well, that could be programmed into the CBDC. A little bit of code, and you could only purchase a fur hat if you haven't purchased one earlier in the year. And if that example sounds ridiculous, well, replace fur hats with handguns. Now, I'm going to back it up just a little bit here for a minute, because one of the things that I've seen in the comments a lot lately is that 2023 is the year of the CBDC. And it's actually kind of catchy now that I say it out loud. I hadn't realized that rhymed, but somebody on YouTube is doing a really good job pushing the idea that a CBDC and total government control is right around the corner. No, I don't agree with that at all. The implementation alone of a new system and then the removal of existing systems, that would take years, and it would span multiple government administrations. But even if we assumed the government had the technical savvy and the political buy-in to roll out the new framework, you still need to convince the public to use it. And I don't know about other countries, but here in the United States, well, we're kind of a belligerent bunch. Now, that's not to say that it's not coming. I just think that it's going to take years, and I don't think it will replace all other options for many more years. I still think, though, that the rollout of a CBDC is really only a matter of time, and the way that I see it being rolled out initially is pretty simple. In the case of entitlements, take Social Security or SSI, unemployment, SNAP, WIC, the government would have a lot more success mandating the use of that CBDC in order to receive those benefits. So, carrot, not a stick. And with the merchant category coding that I mentioned earlier, the government could then also implement controls on what could be purchased with those benefits. Say like SNAP and WIC, they could be limited to only grocery stores and supermarkets, code 5411 for instance. And maybe SSI could be tracked to ensure it wasn't being blown on fur hats. There are lots of controls here that could be implemented without much effort. Now, the key here is that the controls could be far more easily introduced on funds that are either being given by the central government or being managed by the central government. And another control could be adding expirations on the use of those benefits. If you think about the stimulus checks that went out here in the United States, well, the purpose was to stimulate the economy, so maybe it would have made sense to give the funds an expiration date, and that would have ensured that they were used within a certain time frame. And I'm not saying that I think that they should have been issued that way, but that would have fit the purpose. People weren't meant to save the funds, and many people did. They paid down existing revolving debt, which is great, but again, that was not its intent. So had the funds been distributed via a CBDC, the government could have controlled the category of goods that the stimulus could have been spent on, and they could have controlled the duration of time that they'd be good. So still a carrot, not a stick, but that carrot has a definite path that it's leading people on. Now we could take this further into the realm of ESG and inclusion or even social credit systems, but I think that those topics, they're hot buttons that we just don't need to punch up. I'm not here to complain about politics or social change I don't like. I will say, though, that if the idea of the government being able to take the carrot away or the benefits away seems far-fetched, well, we can at least look at how easy it would be to do it technically. If the government gives the funds, well, the government can take them away. And the Chinese government has already prevented citizens from purchasing plane or train tickets, and I know China is a bad example of how the rest of the world operates, but even prior to the implementation of their CBDC, the digital yuan, they've been able to link citizens to a social credit system. So if a person walks a dog without a leash, or they participate in other untrustworthy conduct, like maybe criticizing the government, well, they can be put on a discredited list. So they're blacklisted from purchasing plane tickets and train tickets, like I just mentioned. Now, luckily, most of us here are not Chinese citizens, but a blacklist system like that could be incredibly easy with a CBDC in place for any government. And if you think that a CBDC is about cost or speed, safety or liquidity, it's far more likely that it's about transparency, which in this case means control. So this is really a long way of saying that there are things to think about regarding the future of money and how you choose to use it. Maybe there are reasons to have gold and silver. And that's regardless of how you think they might perform as growth assets. And once again, it's just a practical reason to have hard assets as a backup. So I didn't make this video to trigger anybody. Like I said, none of this is something that we're going to just wake up to at some point in 2023. But the time to plan is always prior to the event. So being aware of it now and planning as you go potentially gives you more flexibility if and when a system like this is implemented. And it should also give you all the time that you need to stock up on those fur hats before Big Brother catches on. And I think that covers it. At least in broad terms, we got a little bit of the when, how, and the why, and we gave another nod toward the practical side of keeping some hard assets. So let us know what you think, whether this has anything to do with having gold or silver to you, whether you think 2023 is the year of the CBDC, or whether you think we have some time to plan. Let us know. And while you're in the comments, be sure to hit the like button. If you found any of this interesting, be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.